Welcome to Edinburgh. Today we're going to have a little look at Edinburgh. More specifically, we're going to look at the streets in Old Edinburgh. That is to say, if you follow my cursor, this area of Edinburgh, which once was contained behind the city walls. Up here on the left-hand corner, we have Edinburgh Castle, which sits upon Castle Rock, an extinct volcano. If we take a walk down the Royal Mile quite quickly, we come to the Scottish Parliament. Down here on the right is another extinct volcano, Arthur's Seat, a place to walk or super fit run. Over here, another hill. At the top, we have Carlton Hill, which has some interesting structures built upon it. Some oddities in Edinburgh. Edinburgh is a very old city. There's traces of people residing here up to 1,000 years ago, and probably far more. It is highly densely built up. So we're going to take a little look into one of these streets in the Royal Mile. Down we go. This'll do nicely. This here, this road running up and down this cobbled street, this is what we call the Royal Mile, leading down into the High Street. This magnificent building is the St. Giles Cathedral. You'll notice the doors here, steps. At the front entrance, there is also steps leading in. This amazing piece of architecture built hundreds of years ago, lasting hundreds of years ago. We don't see the same today. Just placed there in a street. Along this way, the Royal Mile, we have the castle at this end. And you'll notice here this building, columns, ornamental rooftop, railings, and more statues. It is almost a living museum to walk through Edinburgh and see the architecture that cannot be done today. Here we have these tenement buildings going up and down the length and spin you back around the breadth of the Royal Mile. You can see here there's a down at the bottom this pavement, uneven, leading upwards. What I want to show you is what is behind these buildings. So we shall come back out. So we were down here. What we are going to look at is behind the buildings, behind the tenements. What you will see is we have this road running this way, we have ground level much more further below. In fact, we have this whole building coming up here, which is only really seen on the street level at a different view. You can see down here, going down these buildings, but we have this road coming along. And again, these trees that are down here, we have this road up here with houses that go down below. 2 levels in Edinburgh, above and below. And again, we'll just come back out and I'll show you on this side as well. Here is a good example. Here we have this green patch out the back and we have a street level up here. Almost an Escher painting at times. Level, but not level. I want to show you what it's like to be in that street looking up at a level. Down this way is the Greyfriars Kirk yard, I believe. There is a story of a dog that sat at its master's grave after his master died. It's a sad story. And there's a statue that people go to visit. And there's a shop. Here we have the Grassmarket area, a lot of pubs. There's 2 interesting points I would like to show you. First, I would like to show you here. This is one of these roads that's going across, and underneath, streets below. Streets above, streets below. So I will take us down here. As I said, this is just down near the Grassmarket. A very sunny day in Edinburgh. Lots of posters up, possibly the festival. And you can see up here this road coming through and these buildings at this level and coming down here. And just to get the full understanding of the height of these buildings, these tenements, you can notice up here it looks not what you would have a home looking like, more like a rook. Is that the right word? Edinburgh's tenements. As I said, Edinburgh could be like a living museum. We have so many old buildings here and they get almost left to decay in some way. Greyfriars Kirk is up here to the left, and that would take you up onto the road that would then could walk round and look down below here. Just some very beautiful old buildings in Edinburgh. As I said, I wanted to show you 2 parts there. I'm going to show you this other street, just for the fact it's the unusualness of it, I think, for Edinburgh, or the beauty of it. Again, it has a very beautiful, quaint street. Victoria Road, I think it's called. Again, we have this upper level, and then we have this lower level down here as well. So you can see this sort of sweeping street that goes round, which has been created for people to walk above on and also to walk below on. And if you followed that road, you would get back up onto the Royal Mile. But you can see you would reach ground level and you could walk up and you can walk down. It's a very unlevel city, very interesting city, very beautiful. can see the old buildings, the unevenness. So I'm just going to look at a couple of maps. This is a map of Edinburgh in 1590. So up here we have the castle. Down here I assume would be sort of Royal Mile. We have a lot of houses, 1590, all built up with these organised streets. It looks as if there was some town planning done a couple of 100 years before. Around the city, we have these city walls coming out, little point there. Here we have Arthur's Seat, and here we have Calton Hill. And here we have the local water source for the people of Edinburgh. The stories will tell you that the people in Edinburgh were wretched, poverty-ridden, polluting their water, polluting their streets. Is there any difference? Yes, there is. This water was supposed to have been where the inhabitants would have got their fresh water, their wells maybe came from. It's also read that this is where people disposed of human waste. I guess there's a part of me that's just can't understand the sort of evolution of when you actually got your drinking water there and you're emptying your human waste in it. I'm not saying that we do not pollute our waters now. I have seen it. I've seen the pollution in the sea. I have seen litter. I've seen funny colours. But I guess maybe there's a part of me that knows that isn't my drinking water. And maybe the drinking water is still polluted. This becomes the tale of the people of Edinburgh. They are not told off in a high esteem or higher vibrational beings. And we have these city walls, walls to apparently keep the English out, or walls to keep the people in. People were in for safety, or to be a human shield for Edinburgh Castle. I can't help but see all this land outside of these walls, away from dirty, polluted waters. I wonder if I was there, would I choose to live in here, or would I want to roam out in these green fields? And these people down here, out with the walls, but still these shapes, which seem to be part of the same design. Moving on to another map of 1742, so nearly under 200 years before that first map. We have Edinburgh Castle, we have the North Loch, the water. You see far more houses built up here. You see the sort of flat Edinburgh that we saw in the first map. I assume this is coming down a hill. This is the Grassmarket area, Greyfriars Kirk. So we knew we stood here and we saw bridges and roads coming over. And we don't have them yet. Edinburgh still seems to be perhaps one level city. Again, we see more shapes being designed for a grid-like population. Interestingly, this is a map of 1836. Edinburgh was deemed to be becoming overpopulated in the 18th century. So this new town, this area where the cursor is going around, this area here got built. And again, you will see these odd shapes appearing, these circles, half circles, these grid-like designs, especially down here on the right, these new shapes. This is our old town, and this here is our new town. Our new town, because this old town is getting very overpopulated, so a lot of upper class housing was created in this new town. I'm not sure how that answered the old town's overpopulation. I believe most of the old town opulence would have been pushed out further than here, out with the city centre. Again, we can see these shapes, these designs that were being created. Again, up here in the right-hand corner, these circles. I do believe that these shapes were created for more than design, but also for function. I do believe that cities follow a grid on some sort of energy line. I can't read it. I just think it. If you want to know more, I suggest you look up Michelle Gibson on YouTube. She does very interesting videos on this. It is something I definitely want to know more about. But it's enough to be able to look down and to see these shapes, these circles. Here in the left-hand corner, again, these designs, sort of triangle. Very interesting. We're going to let a little look at the history of Edinburgh. So during the Middle Ages, a small fort called Dunedin was built by the Gododins, probably on the Castle Rock. So where the castle sits now, Borough is apparently the name for fort in England. And the Angles took the name Eden and they joined it to Borough, and therefore creating Edinburgh. 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 There is an Eden in Scotland, Eden. I think that definitely means something. We have Eden, we have Eden, we have Edinburgh. So down here it talks about the constant battles between the English. It has peppered our history. Now, for anyone looking at the history of Edinburgh, or for anyone like myself who grew up in Scotland, the history of Edinburgh, as I've said, has always been painted as this dark, dirty, overpopulated place. So around the year 15,000, approximately 12,000 people lived in Edinburgh, and this population grew rapidly. Now, Edinburgh is not a town of industry. Not so much. Glasgow would be. I'm not sure where the people were coming from. Were they leaving the Highlands, or why they were coming there, if it's as bad as it reads. So since Edinburgh was surrounded by the wall, its continually growing population steadily built multi-storey houses. Sometimes they were 12-storey high. And when there was still not enough, they built wooden houses on top of the stone houses. I wonder who built the stone houses, and I wonder if it was the same people who built the wooden houses. Edinburgh became a filthy city, continually hit by plagues, illnesses, and fires. And by the end of the 17th century, the city had a population of 50,000 people. This town is growing. The bubonic plague, typhus, and cholera were present in the everyday lives of Edinburgh's population. These people would shout Gardyloo when they would throw wastewater from their windows into the street to warn passerbys. The citizens would fling their household waste into the Norloch, and many historians believed that it was also used for drinking water. Edinburgh was one of the most unsanitary towns in Europe. Oh, again, Gardyloo, maybe. Would you? Would you throw your waste out your window in front of people that know you? In front of someone that you respect? In front of your neighbours? 300 years we've gone from throwing our waste out a window to bathrooms with doors and locks. I would say that's a step in evolution that should be acknowledged. Going from absolutely no shame of our bodily functions to abject shame where we are locked away. I don't know if I had existed all those years ago, would I have been able to throw my waste out the window? It's an odd story. We start hearing about this new town that's getting talked about because Edinburgh Old Town is so dirty. The council get together and decide that there needs to be a new town built. So the new town gets finished getting built at the beginning of the 19th century, which we saw in that map of all those attractive shapes. And then we see the buildings on Carlton Hill and other buildings of interest constructed during this period, the Scott Monument. So we've gone from this overcrowded old town to this new town with all these magnificent buildings going up. It must have been a sight to see all those builders working on all those buildings. So here we have an old picture of Edinburgh Old Town. You can see clock, I don't know, streets not covered in human excrement. So a couple of people down here. I get the feeling that this street has a label below it. It just makes me think of there being a bridge here and you can look below. So just to bring it down here, which I think's worth pointing out. Here we've got between 1570 to 1690 that the city's population grew threefold from 7,000 to 21,000 and then rising to 40,000. So identifying here that living conditions, unsurprisingly, were sort of appalling. Well, if there was enough houses, it wouldn't be unsurprising. So the plague hit Leith in 1645 and wiped out half its population. And it's saying here only a matter of luck. The city did not suffer. Again, identifying how filthy the people in Edinburgh apparently were. People simply threw their stinking garbage into the streets, leaving it to be washed away by the rain or by other rubbish. And people living together, and crime was rife. Again, with this population growing, you've got to wonder why people would rush to live in this place. It sounds awful. Again, they will talk about this talk of the new town, this building outside of Edinburgh. Just one more story looking at the history. It just has some interesting words in this article. I apologise or it being from a news article, but it's interesting. So again, it's talking about this new town being built. Says here nowadays the historic city around Edinburgh Castle, the old town is a bewildering delight of winding passages and cobbled lanes, which it is, full of pubs, restaurants, boutique shops, and arts venues. But in the 18th century, it represented the very worst in medieval squalor. Prone to fires, repeatedly ravaged by disease, it was notorious for its drunkenness, malevolent ghosts, and violent crime. The 50,000 residents and freely wandering livestock were trapped in its narrow streets, defensive walls, steep ravines, and tottering tenements. So these walls that were supposed to be protecting people, these defensive walls, and yet makes people feel that they're very much hemmed in. And these ghosts, Edinburgh is a very old city. I would imagine there are many ghosts wandering around Edinburgh. So just in this article, it identifies this Lord Provost, George Drummond. George Drummond decided to dedicate his life to improve Edinburgh. So his achievements are creating the first university medical school and founding the Royal Infirmary Hospital. He also decided that Edinburgh needed a new royal exchange. As written here, it says that there was a new culture of optimism in Scotland, a belief in economic progress, and the values of civic society. And yet everything I read tends to look at the population of Edinburgh being so feral that they're unable to rid their waste in a more hygienic manner, that they are criminals, that they are too poor to appreciate buildings. But no, there is optimism. So what we would have then is this building, the city chambers. This is what the Lord Provost had decided Edinburgh needed. We can see these marvellous archways. This is the Royal Mile in front of it. And here we have this beautiful building. So identifying here that the Royal Exchange, now the offices of Edinburgh City Council, was impressive, if not necessarily popular, replacement for the meeting point used by the city's merchants for centuries. But Drummond, he had only just begun. So at this new town where we looked at earlier, we had the circles, the half circles. These are the sort of buildings that you'll see here, these columns, these steps leading up to these doors. And here you'll see my cursor is, these windows are below street level. Now, these houses were not built for the people living in the high tenements in the old town. These houses were built for the middle class. Identifying here the elegant squares, the gleaming terraces, the fine gardens, they were much more than residential ornaments. So, this new town, old town, this city chambers, where does that lead us? We hear about these plagues in Edinburgh. Let's have a little look at that. The plague, perpetuated by the cramped and squalid conditions in the old town. The city's teeming rat population spread plague sporadically and all too frequently, particularly in the decade leading to the development of the new town. That timeline, just before the new town, there is a plague. Down here at the bottom, the prevalent belief at the time was that the blighted were doomed and should be kept far away from the healthy populace. The worst example of this was in Mary King's Close, believed to be the last badly infected location of the old town. In a desperate measure to reduce contamination, over 300 plague victims were entombed alive when the close was bricked up until the plague had passed. 300 plague victims were entombed in their houses. And I'm just going to show you what was built on top of Mary King's Close. It's the city chambers. I've been in Mary King's Close. It's down this way, underneath, comes up. If you hold on, I will get some pictures. This is inside Mary King's Close. These streets were boarded up and built on top of. I went on the tour about 20 years ago. There are vaults underneath Edinburgh that look similar. Some of them look a little different. You can use, well, you can used to. I guess you used to be able to go on tours. You used to be able to go on tours and visit these underground streets, these underground houses, vaults. Edinburgh did market them very well, very much open. I want to show you this one. There's a story behind here, these toys. Apparently there was a little girl called Annie and she died. And her ghost apparently resides there. So people go to shops and buy toys and leave them there. I don't know why. I didn't. I didn't see Annie either. So, just off our Royal Mile, we have these streets underneath that were closed up because just as the new town was being talked about and discussed, this plague hit and they needed to rid the city of the plague victims. So, Mary King's Close, it's a 17th century close. It's saying here the lower floors acted as the foundation for the Royal Exchange, built in 1753. So the lower floors acted as a foundation. Well, I think it's as if to say that it was fortunate rather than unfortunate that these buildings had to be boarded over. But how fortunate that they could be used as a foundation. In 1645, life of the close was shattered forever. The plague struck this little community. And it's here that you realise there are different contributors to this website. They're not going in for the overpopulation, they're going for the little community. And there is a myth that the local council decided to contain the plague by incarcerating the victims, bricking up the close for several years and leaving them to die inside, to die. It is likely this is why the close was nicknamed Street of Sorrows. It certainly has a reputation of being a haunted one, and here it talks of Annie. So, Mary King's Claws, myth. I don't know. I know that there's streets underneath the streets in Edinburgh. I know that we have vaults throughout Edinburgh. I know I've been in quite a few of them. And you'll see down here, just more pictures of the close. And what we find is around these areas is these underground levels. It makes you wonder how many levels Edinburgh actually has. Now, just to finish off our little tour of Edinburgh, I want to show you a picture of Calton Hill. As I said, oddities. So this was built when the new town, all these buildings, when the new town was getting built. And what I shall do is maybe bring, can I get this one up? Yeah. So this is Calton Hill, and here's the castle. So this is our old town. These are our buildings. There are streets, below streets, and then there are streets even further than that. And then you can come up this hill and look all across. Well, I want to thank you for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. And I hope you'll come back and watch the next one. Thank you.